Super excited again to have yet another star joining us, Ben Haggar.
My name's Ben Haggar. I'm a professional action sports and adventure photographer. I shoot a lot of action sports, adventure travel, wildlife, and conservation photography. I also double as a polar guide, which gives me an opportunity to explore some of the wildest places left on the globe, really remote areas. Yeah, so I'm in Squamishe, British Columbia, out on the west coast of Canada, and we've had like an incredible April so far. Lots of bright sun, warm temperatures, and today it's overcast and cloudy.
So I guess the motif helps you stay in the sunny frame of mind despite all that's going on in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a bit of a tough time for everyone. So
Okay.
just gotta keep things positive, right?
Yeah, you do, and that has been our theme. We've been talking about staying positive and productive, which is really how this outdoor photography series started. With you talking a little bit about your background, what led you to photography? How did you end up here?
So yeah, I got started in photography at quite an early age. My family has a 3-generation deep background in Kodak as chemical engineers. So before they went bust, I was really lucky because when I was growing up, my uncle would bring us experimental film that he was working on. And so like we were playing around with infrared film and all kinds of different strange and wonderful technologies. So some of them were great and some of them were a little bit difficult to use. So I don't know if that was a good thing or a hindrance to my early photography days, because if it was a bad batch of film, then you'd get all discouraged that your photos didn't turn out and things like that.
Well,
But yeah, so I think I came by photography somewhat obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, oftentimes when you have to learn with older technologies, it made you work harder and in a way gain a greater appreciation for the tools that you had to work with, right?
Oh, absolutely. You really had to be bang on with your light metering and your exposure and really think about each different shot compared to just the spray and pray kind of philosophy sometimes you get these days.
If you will. What was your first professional job? How did that evolve into a career?
So as a photographer, I really wanted to kind of stick to what I wanted to shoot. I went into photography from a kind of a construction management field, and I'm a carpenter by trade. So I had that, I had a really great lifestyle where I could do, construction contracts and then go and travel and take photos as much as I wanted. And I kind of wanted to keep a similar type of lifestyle there. So I really didn't want to, for me, shooting weddings was not really much of an interest or, as much of the commercial photography thing. So I really wanted to focus on the inspirational adventure stories was just what really, really fired up my passion. So I guess my first one that I really, really wanted to try and make a break at was back in 2013. My girlfriend and I and another couple of friends, we did a kayaking surfing trip out on a really remote part of Vancouver Island off the coast there, and just wanted to go out and discover some waves and see what we could find. And so eventually got some amazing shots, had a great trip, amazing experience, and I ended up selling that story as a feature to Adventure Kayak. And then just really liked the whole process of editorial photography where you develop the ideas, pitch them around to different editors, see who bites. And then you basically get to do what you would love to do anyways. And then, try and make an interesting angle on it or stories out of it. And it just kind of evolved from there. Yeah, so again, it was, kind of by circumstance. This was back in 2014. Again, my girlfriend and I, we really wanted to try and travel and, earn some money at the same time. And we had some connections with this polar expedition company out of Squamish, British Columbia, where we live currently. So, one thing led to another. My girlfriend, she managed to get us in contact, and we had a 3-hour interview, and basically it was just them telling us how amazing this job would be. And then 3 weeks later, I find myself on one of these Russian research vessels, an expedition ship, taking a group of tourists down to South Georgia Island. The images that we see that are up on the screen here right now that you're going through, they're from that very first trip that I took down there, and that was 3 weeks of crossing the Drake Passage, going through massive waves, and just experiencing these incredible landscapes with immense amounts of wildlife and gigantic icebergs. And after that first trip, I was just hooked. It was a really incredible experience where I could go down and guide and show people these amazing places, teach them about the wildlife, and kind of about how the climate's affecting these really fragile regions that are just absolutely spectacular.
Okay. I want to get back to that in a minute, but I wanted to take a detour and talk gear a little bit. Historically, I know, you said you started shooting back with the Kodak and, film and all that. You eventually moved into DSLRs. I recall you used to shoot Canon gear and, camera lenses, and then you've evolved now into shooting Olympus. So I was hoping that you can talk us through that evolution, sort of your rationale, your experience with the gear, and how you evolved and using different gear into where you are today and what gear you shoot today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you say, I started off on Canon gear. It was all back in the film days. So I had these old hand-me-down, big clunky DSLRs. They were really heavy and had basically one single fixed lens. And that was a great way to learn. I absolutely loved shooting film and being in the dark room and playing around with that whole side of things. And then I think it was in the year, I'm going to say 2003 was when I got my first DSLR. Again, it was a Canon, I think it was a Canon Rebel that I bought in Sydney, Australia when I was living there.
Uh-huh.
And I remember having a real big debate whether I should get a 1 gigabyte card or a 2 gigabyte card. And the 2 gigabyte card at the time was, I think, 500 Australian dollars, which seems ridiculous now. But to be able to travel and not have to change cards was a huge thing for me. And just stepping into the digital world was just such a great learning curve, because you got to shoot as much as you wanted, have these instant results on the back of the camera, and then realize that you'd been doing everything wrong, and just a few little tweaks your photography would just improve so quickly and just skyrocket. So that was great back in the early 2000s there. And then eventually just kept on upgrading.
And you're using Olympus today. Can you give us a sense of which cameras, which lenses you're shooting most often? Do you travel with all of it? Do you have specific ones that you use for specific jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm shooting on the Olympus OMD EM1 Mark II camera. I know it's a little bit of a mouthful, but it's an incredible camera. It's one down from their highest level professional camera, and it's great. It's I usually bring along with me a 24 to 200 f4 lens, and that's kind of the workhorse. It's the one that I keep on for most of the video work, because it's got this incredible image stabilizer. So it's a 5-axis stabilizer in camera and then a 5-axis in lens stabilizer. So when they work together in conjunction, you get these incredibly smooth shots that you don't need to have a gimbal doing. Yeah, exactly. So no gimbal for video that's necessary, and it's just like a perfect range of focal lengths. But then when I'm doing longer trips and larger assignments, I'll bring a fisheye lens as well, so like a fisheye zoom, so it's 14 to 28. That combined with the 24 to 200, and then when I'm out shooting wildlife up in the Arctic, because you need a lot of reach, I've got a 600 mil f4 lens and then a 1.4 teleconverter that goes with that as well. So that's kind of what rounds out the mirrorless kit for me. When I'm doing a lot of mountain bike or expedition photography, that's when we're going to be planning out a lot of the shots. So we'll have the athletes that I work with, they're amazing. A lot of them are avid photographers and videographers as well. So, in combination, the two of us will, or multiple people, will kind of, figure out a shot that'll look really good, what the lighting's doing, and then have a vision of that, and then be able to set it up, take a few different frames, try and reposition, and just really dial in kind of a a forethought image that we had in mind when we saw the scene.
Uh-huh.
And then contrast that with wildlife, where nothing ever seems to make sense what the wildlife's going to do. I mean, you do all of your research about, polar bears or penguins, or, what their lifestyle is like, and kind of what their behavior, what you expect that they would do. And then they'll do something completely different. So it's more of that kind of documentary style where it's a lot about luck, and it's a lot about being at the right place at the right time, being patient, waiting for those really interesting key moments that'll just appear, and then you have to be exactly ready for that. Okay. So for that reason, when I'm shooting wildlife, I won't shoot manual. I'll generally shoot either aperture or shutter priority. I know a lot of the other professionals will really cringe at me saying that, but for me, the just having to be able to focus on the wildlife and not have to think about my settings. If a cloud's starting to come over the sun and the light's changing, I want to be able to know that my camera's doing exactly what it needs to be doing. With all that amazing technology in there, I want to use it to its full capability, so I don't have to think about the camera as much. Right. Whereas when I'm shooting anything with flash, I want complete control, so I'm going to be on manual the entire time. And then half the time when I'm shooting mountain biking, when we're setting up shots and things like that, sometimes I'll be on manual, sometimes I'll be on one of the priority modes. So yeah, it's all kind of dependent on, what the weather's doing and the subject matter, really.
Okay. Do you consider, before we get into the Arctic itself and some of the wildlife in winter there, do you consider yourself to have a style? Do you feel like you've created or evolved into a style? Do you feel like there are different types of photography that you do? How do you describe your own work, if you do at all? How do you categorize your work? And I, don't get this the wrong way. I know the world often wants to know or puts things into neat boxes, and so I'm not suggesting that you are, but I'm just wondering, it's a question that I ask of different people. How do they think of themselves, and how do they see their work evolving?
Yeah, so I kind of envision myself more as a documentary photographer. It's funny because over the years I'm finding, when I'm on an assignment, say for Bike Magazine, I used to really focus on a lot of the action shots and getting all these amazing shots of, incredible riding, beautiful backdrops, and then when you see the final article published, 2 or 3 of those shots are published, and then the rest is what we're calling B-roll, basically. And okay. I don't know, over the years, I'm finding that the B-roll is really turning into the A-roll. So all the things that are happening on the trails, and what kind of the culture you're experiencing is, and kind of everything around what the central action point would have been, which is... Okay. Yeah, it's kind of been an evolution. So that's why I would consider myself more of a documentary type photographer, because I really love everything that's happening around that action as well. And back to your question about a particular style, I think I do, but I don't exactly know how to explain it. I think I'm starting to get to the point where images of mine are recognizable. Yeah, so it's tricky to describe what my actual style is. But I feel like I've got some recognizable images now that, when you see an image pop up, you're like, oh, that might be a Ben Haggar photo. And I feel like it's more of the kind of the subject matter and the way that I think I interact with my subjects as well. I want people to feel like they're part of a scene. So I know that there's a good number of people that do that same type of style. But that's just what I've been striving for. Yeah, so just with my photography, I'm a freelancer as far as guiding work goes as well. So I'll be kind of jumping around to a bunch of different organizations and companies. But the strange thing for this year is due to COVID-19, there's not going to be any tourism of any kind up in the Arctic this year. So yeah, so that's a little bit of a tricky one. A couple of the main operators up there that I'm speaking with at the moment would be Arctic Kingdom and Churchill Wild as well. They seem to do some really good on the ground work with polar bears, where you can actually go out hiking and kayaking and things like that with the polar bears out on the ground, which is an incredible experience compared to seeing it from a ship, which is also absolutely amazing, but it's just kind of a different feel. There's a few images that really kind of come to mind when you ask that first question there, especially if we're going to focus on the polar bear thing. I'd say one of the experiences where I've got a couple of my favorite polar bear shots. My parents have one hanging in their living room, and it's a photo of the polar bear. It's locked in perfect eye contact and walking straight towards me along a sandy beach. Yeah, that's the one right there. And so there's kind of an interesting story around that one. Kind of funny mistake on my part, but the images turned out really good, so I'm pretty happy with these ones. So this was taken up in Svalbard, so a group of Arctic islands off the northern coast of Norway. And we're on a Russian expedition ship, the same one that we saw a few photos before, crashing through the waves in the Drake Passage there. So we were up, that's the ship. So that was the academic Sergei Vavilov. It's a great ship. Used to run tours on that one for about 5 years. And so we're up in the very northern tip of Spitsbergen, the main island on Svalbard. And so we've got a group of tourists, and we've taken, some are off kayaking, some are off hiking, and we hadn't seen many polar bears at this point. So basically, I took one of the Zodiacs, the inflatable, skiffs that we were using at the time, and just started searching the fjord and going in and out of different bays and things with my binoculars, looking for walrus, looking for mainly polar bears. And then eventually managed to spot one. So it was this guy that was he was coming way from the mountains inland, coming out this river valley. And in the Arctic they have these phenomenon called the Fata Morgana. It's basically like a mirage. So the the heat coming off the ground and the evaporation that happens up there, it kind of makes these mirages. So I wasn't exactly sure if I was seeing a polar bear and didn't want to radio the other guides just in case it was a false sighting. So I just kept my eye on this bear, and it was just head sniffing the air and just moving straight out to the coast here. So I was getting really excited because it's just this little buttery dot in the middle of this massive mountainous landscape. So it ends up coming straight for me. So what I was doing was basically had my Zodiac floating offshore, shut the engine off, had my camera out. I'd already radioed the other guides because it was a beautiful male. And again, we hadn't seen many polar bears on that trip just yet. So this polar bear comes right out to the edge, again sniffing, and then we lock eyes, and I'm just so excited that I've got all this in my viewfinder. We're just having this great intimate moment, and then it lowers its head and starts coming out into the water in full hunt mode. So I'm just really excited about these shots and kind of not really focusing on what's actually happening around me. So
I'm sitting back here like just dying, listening to you tell the story.
Yeah, because it's not gonna, it ends well, but we had.
You're talking to me, I can't believe it.
Yeah, so when the bear starts coming out into the water, it looks fairly shallow because it's this outwash plain at the end of a river. So I managed to tear the camera out of my hands, put it down, and I'm thinking, okay, bear's probably 40, 60 meters away right now. I should probably get going because A, I don't want it to come and attack me, and then B, I don't want it to swim away either because I want everybody else to be able to see this thing. So I go back to the engine to start it up, and the engine won't start. Of course.
At least you knew which lens you were using.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
You're not like, oh yeah, I'm on the zoom lens, it's fine, and then you realize you're on a wide angle.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, oh wow, this thing's getting really close. So basically, went to the back, tried to start the engine. The engine wouldn't start, and by this time, I'm just getting really, really nervous. And I checked the engine, everything seems to be working fine. And then I looked down because I know the engine, it was working fine before this all started. And I looked down, and in the murky water, I can just see that the propeller's grounded out on the sand. So if the propeller won't turn, then the engine won't really turn over as well. So I managed to wrestle the engine out of the sand, get it turned on. Polar bear is still coming at me here, and just managed to crank it into reverse and zip away. just in time, and it startled the bear slightly and kind of lost interest. And then basically we had this 45 minutes alone together where the bear was just cruising along the beach, looking for food to scavenge. And, I was just going along about 60 meters offshore, making sure that I was in deep enough water this time, and just getting, amazing photographs the whole time. And it was just such a special moment. And the rest of the group managed to join in. Everybody got really beautiful photos, and we got to spend probably about 2 hours in total with this bear, just cruising along the shoreline and just having a great time.
Good. I'm glad that that's nobody from the crew.
Yeah, exactly.
Was this the same bear?
No, so this was a different trip. This would have been in the Canadian Arctic, going through the Northwest Passage. And again, we're always out with spotting scopes and binoculars, just looking for bears, any sign. They're always going to be out on the sea ice as long as they can, just for that's how they hunt. And they're, it's the best platform for searching for seals and things. So we came across this really big bear. He had just caught a seal. This is a ring seal, one of their favorite foods up in the Canadian Arctic. And he was just so fat with blubber that half the time he just, it's almost like he had the meat sweats, and he was just really, really tired from eating so much blubber that he would just lay down, splayed out, like arms wide, legs spread wide open, and just have his head resting on the carcass, just chewing away slowly, because they just absolutely love this. And when they can get their fill, then, they're just going to eat until they explode, basically. For a lot of the companies, they'll offer specific photography programs. So you can, part of what I do is I'm mentoring guests that we go down with about, wildlife photography. So we can hang out together and chat settings and figure out different shots and talk about what they want to actually tell their stories about and different things. So, I'd say the main consideration is choosing operators that are eco-minded.
Okay.
Doing things in the right way, because especially when you're down in the Antarctic, the wildlife there, they have no natural land predators. So when you're on the shore with penguins, they're walking right up to you, they're interacting, and basically you just want to let the wildlife be the wildlife. So you don't want to be kind of in their transit zones where they're going back and forth from the water. You don't want to be too close to the nests that have chicks on them. When they're molting, you want to stay away from them, because they can't go into the sea for food, so they have to stay on land for a month to 6 weeks at a time, and that's really energy intensive. So you don't want to be putting any extra stress. So the main thing is choosing an operator. There's tons of operators that are going to the polar regions where you just get incredible wildlife shots, no matter what kind of a photographer you are, if you're on your iPhone or anything. But the main thing, is that they're doing it responsibly, where they're not interfering with the wildlife. They're interacting, but only on the animals' terms. And that they have a good kind of eco footprint, using biodiesels when you're in the polar regions, and just trying to do the small things of reducing their plastic consumption and all those little things. So that's a really big consideration for me.
Okay. We're getting some questions from the audience, and I want to encourage, if people have questions, send them our way on any subject. One question we got was about your favorite adventure to date that you may want to share with us.
Okay, favorite adventure. There's definitely a lot of them, but I'd say one of the most memorable ones was a solo bikepacking trip I did in Greenland in 2017. So I've had this route envisioned in my mind for a couple of years before, and I had a guiding contract that aligned perfectly with. I think it was about a month or 6 weeks of work up in the Northwest Passage in Canada. We ended up finishing in Greenland as well, so I was able to drop some bags at my finishing destination, and then traveled around to a town called Kangerlussuaq, which is sits at the head of the longest fjord in the world. And there's a trail that's called the Arctic Circle Trail. That's it's about 200 kilometers as you go across the tundra, point to point ride. And I decided to start at the Greenland as ice cap as well. So I pedaled 25 kilometers back towards the interior, spent a night up by the ice cap, and then did this traverse which was spectacular, and one of the best, most formative trips I've ever done. Mainly because I got caught halfway through, got hit by the hurricane, and had to spend a couple days in a tiny little garden shed, basically just waiting out the weather and rationing food, and it was a pretty intense experience, and I wasn't really enjoying it as much at the time. But it's one of those trips where you look back and it's just an incredible feeling to be out in somewhere that remote, just absolutely solo, and able to just kind of be out in the wilds like that.
Okay, we're getting more questions from the audience. The other one is, and I'm assuming that they mean on the polar bear type tours, how long do you stay on one location?
Yeah, so with polar bears, we'll basically just judge by the animal's behavior. So, say if we'll come to, a bear on shore, we'll generally be out in zodiacs and try and get, somewhat close. We don't want to change the animal's behavior by any means. So if they're in an active hunt, this is that photo that's up there right now. This is a female who was kind of right in the middle of hunting down a seal. So we managed to keep our distance, but we could still, with the longer zoom lenses, get some great photos. And just, it's amazing to watch, the hunting techniques where they'll, sneak up and then slip into the water super silently. And then, a little head will just pop up above the surface another 20 meters away, and you can see it getting closer to the seal. So I believe we were on this particular bear for about 4 hours. And again, just keeping our distance back and kind of following her progress and just seeing what she was going to be doing, and not wanting to interfere. But just, once the hunt eventually failed, she kind of got more interested in us and then came closer to the boat and, was looking up and down at us and, just really, really curious. So it was an incredible encounter, and just really lucky to have that. So back to the question there. It'll be, sometimes a bear will be showing signs of, agitation, gnashing the teeth and, kind of moving around unsettled. And if that's the case, then we'll move off straight away and just leave the bear alone, because they obviously don't want any company. So it could be, anything from 15 minutes to, a matter of hours, or even a full day, potentially, if they're really excited about us.
Your polar bear story was fascinating. I imagine that you get to see things that, I'm a documentary buff, and I love watching, environmental shows and preservation shows and nature shows. So I see a lot of things that I find fascinating. I'm wondering what stories you have, or things that come to mind that are either out of the norm or extraordinary, that you can also share with us.
This is a great example of a story. These are, in the previous shot, these are fur seals. So Antarctic fur seals, which were basically hunted to near extinction. Now there's over 2 million on South Georgia Island alone. So they've came back in incredible numbers, and they're just overtaking the beaches. And it's basically because humans decided not to hunt them anymore, because they were basically at the point of collapse. And then if left on their own, to fend for themselves, then, eventually their numbers came back. And it's just incredible to see when you come up to a South Georgia beach and there's just fur seals and penguins and all this wildlife just running all over the place. And you're just like, where do I even start here? Like, how do I even get my foot on shore when there's so many animals running around? So I think a lot of the conservation stories where, the Antarctic has such a horrendous history about, wildlife exploitation, especially with the whales, the, humpbacks, blue whales, minkies, like everything's been hunted so far and so close to extinction down there that it's really amazing when you go to different places. So there's, we had a couple different areas where there used to be really, really heavy whaling, and whales, because they're so long-lived, they have kind of a memory of areas that they like to avoid, and they would always try and avoid ships and things, and they'd pass that on to their calves and to the young. So to see that the whales are getting more curious in ships and boats and and coming back into these areas that were, absolute no-go zones before, where there was, a whaling station right on shore where they would shoot them from the shoreline and drag them up. And, there was no way that a whale would be seen in there for 40, 50 years. And now to see that they're coming back to these areas is absolutely incredible, where you can interact with them. They're curious, and, you just kind of get a sense of they're starting to relax because we've got these different measures in place where, they're protected and they can just kind of roam freely. And then once they've kind of had that bad memory, expunged from their kind of conscious memory system, then they're free to act like they would, 100, 200 years ago, it's incredible.
That's nice to hear. You don't get that kind of good news that often, and so it's nice to know that there are still a few rays of sunshine. We had another question about the smells. Does it smell? Obviously animals are using the sense of smell to hunt. How pungent is it? What's the experience like?
Yeah, so the one thing about a penguin colony is that you will never forget the smell. It is just the most repulsive, disgusting. You always see these like beautiful, pristine penguins like this guy who's just gotten out of the water and he's nice and clean. But when they're in the middle of a colony, it is just incredible. So if anything, you want to just try and stand upwind when you're approaching these things. But you can smell them for kilometers offshore. Yeah, absolutely. There's the whole gamut where you can go from, amazing luxury penthouse suites to the lower grade accommodations. A lot of the polar bear camps, they'll be really, beautiful accommodations, nice rooms. Some of them you'll be out on a floe edge where you're in, fairly large tents, but still fairly rudimentary. For me, I've mainly worked on what we'd call, say, like 3-star ships, where it's very basic accommodation. It's comfortable, but it's not fancy by any means, because the main thing is making it, a little bit more financially accessible for people. That being said, the polar region, all the way down, all the way back, and the logistics involved. But I think the 3-star accommodation, for me, it was totally manageable and great. And, we focused all our efforts on getting off the ship as much as possible and just being out, interacting with the landscape and the wildlife. Yeah, so there's a couple major projects that I'm working on currently that I've had to put on hold. So one of them is, I call it the Garibaldi 100 project. So that's a local project that I've been working on since January 1st. And that is a project really close to home and kind of close to my heart as well, where right where we live in southwestern British Columbia, there's this incredible provincial park, Garibaldi Park, which is turning 100 years old this year. So a friend of mine, Sean Campbell, and I were attempting to do 100 summits in the park in the calendar year of 2020. And obviously we've had to put that one on hold with COVID right now because, it's a bad scenario. All the parks in British Columbia are closed. We don't want to put any extra strain on the healthcare system or the search and rescue system. So,
sure.
Since mid-March, we've put a stop to that one. So I'm really looking forward to getting back out in the mountains and ticking off some more mountains there. And then another major one that is a bit of a question mark right now is traveling to Pakistan for an assignment in September.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll just see if travel restrictions are listed, and if so, I'm really excited about that one. It's going to be a great trip into the Karakoram, and if not, then hopefully next year.
From listening to you, it doesn't sound like you scare easy, but we did get a question about if you're scared of fur seals, and I guess in general, what are some of the things to keep in mind, of your humanity when you're up there?
Yeah, so fur seals, they're definitely a special breed where they're a little bit unpredictable. When you get to a landing in South Georgia, the first person off the boat has to basically clear a little bit of a path in the fur seals. So we've got this really advanced technology of using a trekking pole held at arm length. And so the seals will ideally bite at that instead of biting at you. Okay. So when you have have to try and clear a way through the fur seals. It's definitely pretty exciting. And I've had a couple of very close encounters where, it got a little bit too close for comfort. They're actually, distant ancestors of grizzly bears, where that kind of split off. They went into the ocean, and grizzlies went off into onto the land. So that gives you a bit of a sense of, they're a little bit territorial about their patch of beach when it's mating season. And,
Okay.
yeah, it can get a bit spicy. So I've definitely had a few close calls there. No, I think we've pretty much covered it. Again, if there's any other questions, people are interested, they can always email me or send me a direct message on Instagram. I'm always pretty good at replying to anything, whether it's, about the trips or the polar bear photography, or just you want to log in and say hi. I'm always open, so feel free to shoot anything my way.
So in terms of cameras or lenses or other gear that you would advise people to bring, so if they don't want to maybe carry, a whole set of suitcases for their gear, what advice do you have as to what equipment they should bring?
Lots of batteries if you're going to be traveling somewhere cold. That's something that you never want to skimp on. Mm-hmm. I usually bring one backup camera body as well. It's not in the cards for everyone, so if you can just bring one setup that you're really familiar with, you don't want to be learning your camera on the fly. That's for sure. So bring, only a couple of lenses. Don't think that you need to have the biggest reach, because, shorter lenses, when we have these beautiful landscapes, they tell a whole different story. So bring something, whatever you're going to be shooting with at home, bring that. You don't want to have anything that's really new or too technologically different or difficult that you have to be figuring out on the fly there. So that and lens cloths. Always make sure that you're bringing a ton of lens cloth so you can keep all the salt water spray and things off your really expensive glass.
Fantastic. Well, Ben, thank you so much. I really enjoy this. I usually do, and all of our chats have always been entertaining, if not educational. So thanks again for being with us. And I look forward to getting together in person at some point in the future, hopefully. Best of luck with everything, and stay safe.
All right. Thanks a lot for having me, JR. I really appreciate it. And I want to say thanks to you and Outex for the support over the years as well. Really appreciate it, and it helps me do what I do best.